Hi everyone, it's Simon Massey here from the Manchester Met Q-Step Centre, and in this video we're going to talk about types of data in variable measurement. Now, as we do with all videos, we're going to break this down to help you understand the difference between categorical and numerical data, and how those two different types of data help us understand the three different variable measures: nominal, ordinal, and scale. So let's get started. Now, before we do, I think it's also important to mention here that by watching this video, you might start to become more familiar with these terms and concepts. But if you don't feel 100% confident after watching this video once, that's okay. Feel free to watch this as many times as you want. But I also really encourage you to have a go at the independent tasks that we've provided to go with this video, because by actually engaging in something practically, you'll be much more likely to understand it. And another important thing to remember is that when we analyse data as a bunch of random numbers without any understanding as to what these numbers mean, we often feel frustrated and confused. So always take the time to try and understand what these terms mean before moving on to the next stage. The reason I say that is because we always talk about variable measurement in statistics, because measurement is everything. Think about the fact that when you want to measure something, you can physically see it, and you have instruments ready to go that you already know how to use to measure that thing. For example, a tape measure, where it's measuring centimetres or inches. If you want to measure distance on a much larger scale, you have yards, you have miles. Things that you can actually feel, for example, something that we want to measure the weight of, we have kilograms. Things that we want to measure in terms of what we can hear, we have decibels. Even wind can be measured. But how do we measure people's thoughts and feelings? Now, this is a common question that we have in the social sciences, but it's a question many industries are asking, particularly when they want to survey their customers or service users. And that is the key question when it comes to recognizing variable types and even types of data. Because let's face it, using a tape measure to measure people's thoughts and feelings isn't quite going to work. Now, there's two different types of data. There's numerical and categorical. Now, numerical data are often examples that we've already become familiar with, where the actual value itself is what is important here. And if you look at this, height, temperature, and speed, what they all have in common is the fact that the number itself is what we want to look at. Even though Celsius, inches, or feet, and speed, they're all very different things, the unit of measurement is the number. Categorical data, on the other hand, is where a category has a label applied to it. For example, someone's favourite flavour of pie. We know that that's not numerical data because there's no numbers there. It's the actual word that we are interested in. And that's a trick to remember with categorical data. Categorical data often is words, whereas numerical data is always numbers. Now let's explore that a little bit further. Categorical data is data that we can categorise into groups. And here is a list of different examples of categorical data. Now, what you can see with all of those are they are categories that we can apply to people's sense of identity. But there are other things out there that can be regarded categorical data. The key thing to remember is the data you are looking at has been categorized into a group. Numerical data, on the other hand, is a little bit different because there are no categories. So this is what's regarded as continuous data, where the actual raw value is what's important. And because we're looking at the raw value, we tend to get many different responses. If you're looking at somebody's age, for example, there are lots of different ages. Categorizing them whilst possible, when you're looking at the raw value, you're looking at it in a continuous state. And remember, numbers go on forever. And that's why we call it continuous. So numerical data is often data that we are looking at and capturing where the raw value is the key thing. Now, you might have noticed in those last two slides that age was in both categorical and numerical data, because age is a common example of a variable measure that can be whatever we want it to be. Now, nominal and ordinal are what we class as categorical data, and ordinal and scale are what we class as interval data, which is another word for numerical data. Now, here is an example of how age can be measured in different formats. The first one, nominal, is the least used method when it comes to measuring age. And what you have there are just two categories that do not fall into a particular order of any sort. If you look at the ordinal example under categorical, that is probably a measure of age that you're more familiar with, where we have a label applied to a particular group that helps us identify at what stage in our lives we are. The interval example is a bit more complicated, but all it is a bunch of different categories for people's age, where the distance in those numbers is exactly the same each time. So in that example, you can see it's 9 years in each interval or each group. With categorical, the ranges are very different. We've got a range of 10 to 30 and then a much bigger range of 31 to 65. And that's the difference between categorical and interval. Interval requires a consistent distance between the numbers. And scale, there are no groups. So scale is the most common example of numerical data, where the raw value is what is being interpreted, meaning we have no categories. If that is starting to help, take a look at this resource, because what this is doing is helping you figure out what measurement your variable is by going through this particular flow chart. And hopefully, by going through this process here, you will start to identify what type of measures you are working with.